So at present, yes, at present, let's just welcome formally. So we have June Elizabeth with us today from Northampton. We have Dr. Vivian Crawford from Jamaica. Myself, Garrick Prayog from UK, the northwest of England, which is a little place called Cheshire, just overlooking Liverpool. Who else is with us today that we could give a location?
You've got Joan. You've got Joan.
Joan, where is your location, please?
London, West London, Ladbroke Grove.
So we have somebody from Ladbroke Grove, West London. Thank you. Anybody else from the UK?
Simon.
Simon's from Nottingham.
Derby, actually, yes.
Derby. Yes. Thank you. That's close. So this is our little family on the Black History Conversation. So most of us are here week by week, so we are regulars. Yeah. Sometime we get new people for the first time joining us. So today we have a small number. So welcome. Liz had asked you to prepare a presentation. So clearly we're going to allow you to present your presentation. Then we will have some question in relation to what you present to us. And let's see how the conversation develops.
Could I just say something? Could we all put our mute ourselves to get a better volume from our guest speaker? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hello, everyone. I'm not too far away from you. I'm currently in Brighton. And so I'm not too far away from you. And the rest of us, it's almost, we're just neighbors compared to Dr. Crawford. So, yeah, and at this very moment, over the last 2 days, in fact, starting Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this week, we'll have a small group of facilitators from around the world. We have someone coming from the US, someone from Nigeria, and the rest of us from the UNESCO team. We are here together to explore how we could extend the kind of the work we've done over the last years to global communities. So it'd be really good to hear your feedback on this work. And this work is UNESCO's Collective Healing Initiative. I'm going to share the slide on my computer so that we can just go through some of the details, because it's easier for you to actually see what we're trying to do and what is called the different partners involved. Now you see that it's called collective healing. Basically, it's the process involved, and social justice is the structural condition we're seeking, and then global well-being is the end of the collective healing. Now, just a little quick outline of what we've been doing and why me. I've been to many communities, and those communities often expect someone working on the history of slavery and Black history to be someone have a different color of skin, and why they would look at me and say, why the hell you are here? So just a little bit explanation of why I'm here. In 1997, I was a young person taking an internship. I was a student and come to Brighton where there's a think tank called the Gerhard Ms. Foundation for Peace. And they started the work on healing the wounds of history. I was very drawn to that idea. So my study, as I completed my study, I was also took an interest in what the collective the healing the wounds of history consist of, what the community's sufferings were, and how through healing the community can reach another stage in terms of the communal development, but also social transformation. So 2004, I completed my studies and began to accompany different communities' healing journeys. So I've been in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, in Africa, and also in Latin America. So in this process, we learned a lot more what healing can do for the community, but also what healing wounds constitute. And in 2017, UNESCO's Roots of Enslaved Peoples project, it is what it's called now, but at that time it's called as a Slave Root Project. They asked the Hermes Foundation to support or to include an element of collective healing. So since then, we went through a couple of symposiums just to look at globally what has been done, what could be done, what the possibilities is for what the possibilities are for UNESCO. And UNESCO has also founded an advisory board. And since 2021, I led a kind of a research and report on approaches and the practice to collective healing, drawing from across the planet. And so if Liz were here, she would recognize some of the work that's been done in Australia, for instance, through the Sorry movement, but also in New Zealand, where there's indigenous people, the Maori, were able to develop a co-creative approach with the government that has an element of healing. And in 2021, I facilitated the development of a special issue that looked at the legacies of slavery, but also the opportunities healing can do in addressing those legacies so that communities can embark on a journey of well-being. And 2022-2023, we started a global pilot in 5 countries, basically thinking about the Atlantic is a little pond. So we have a site in East Africa, that's in the Horn of Africa in Kenya, in West Africa in Nigeria, and then the other side we have Colombia, because Colombia is an interesting country. It has the Afro part, but also indigenous community. These are all parts of the transatlantic history. And then the US and the UK. So we have 5 countries participating in a pilot. That pilot I will explain later in this presentation. And 2023, last year, we have a whole year of UNESCO webinar series addressing this. Again, I'll include the link or send the link to Liz or the core group so that you can take a look and see how global experts talk about the imperative of healing and in this context. And then last year we participated in UN Decade, the second session as part of UN Decades of People African Descent. And in that forum in New York, we heard this idea being repeated by both indigenous communities, but also people of African descent, that slavery and the brutality of structural violence through the legacies of slavery and also colonialism and so on is above all a spiritual harm. We recognize that it is a physical harm, it's a material harm, it's a emotional harm, it's psychological harm, and relational harm, but above all, it's also a spiritual harm. So we had 2 symposium on that, and now, under the leadership of UNESCO Assistant Director General Gabriela Ramos, we're looking at gathering again communities around the Atlantic shore to host within the local communities collective healing circles, and this will be part of the celebration of 30 years of Roots Enslaved Peoples Project. Now, here's what this Roots Enslaved Peoples Project constitutes. It was founded, as I said, in 1984, at a time when there's a global denial of the history of slavery and the trade of enslaved people, or another discourse is it's happened hundreds of years ago. What has anything to do with us now? So at that context, this UNESCO developed this project at that time called the Slave Root Project. It wants to deconstruct the discourse and also looking at the social fabrication of the notion of race, but in the meantime also to recognize and affirm the contribution of people of African descent to the general development of humanity, but also question the structural injustice and how we can co-create that conditions so that there will be people will no longer live in the continued legacies of tragedy. So the work on collective healing that I just explained is part of a much wider global effort to heal the world. I'll explain why it's a heal the world. It's not just the people who have suffered, but the whole humanity has suffered because that at the perpetuation of that legacy. So firstly, that's a part of the UN decade we talk about, and also UNESCO's medium-term objectives all the way to 2029. Focus on youth, Africa, and gender equality. And but also as a part of UNESCO's Global Forum, anti-racism, also form of discrimination. And it is part of the UNESCO's enslaved people. And that is at the bottom, we were just an initiative to support it by all this global effort. So what are we doing? Why history is important. And I think for many of you, probably this quote is not unfamiliar. Now, James Baldwin, we all know this great African-American poet and a writer. And he says, it's really worth repeating this. He says, history does not refer merely or even principally to the past. On the contrary, the great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it within us, it's embodied in us, are unconsciously controlled by it in many ways. And history is literally present in all that we do. It could scarcely be otherwise, since it's to history that we all are frame of reference, how we value what we value, our identity, who we are, where we're rooted, what's our belonging, and also our aspirations. So that means our future is owing to its connected history. So understanding history, addressing history, having the Black history conversation connected to our present, but also connected to the way that we construct the future. And in terms of future, I just want to say an anecdote story that in our work with the global communities, one of the elders, her ancestor, her grandmother, was actually amongst the last to be enslaved and working in a plantation. So this elder said when she was a little girl, she overheard her mother and the grandmother talking about that history, about the grandmother's child, even in her age, like 5, 7. And the grandma said, you know, she was working in the plantation, in the plantation, and just recounted the brutality that she endured as a little girl, age 7. So this granddaughter, even though she was a young girl, but she could sense the pain and the brutality. She just raised her head from the lap of her grandmother and said, "How could you put up with all this? It sounds so cruel and so horrific." And the grandmother looked at her and said, "Because I knew you were coming. I knew you were coming. Therefore, all that I have to do is so that you don't have to go through this again." Now, so that's the project. You probably have children, grandchildren. That's to them. We owe to them that we must do this. We must do collective healing. We must rectify that history and be, in John Salk's words, be the good ancestors. So the UNESCO's Collective Healing Initiative consists of 4 parts. The first part is actually having community experience of IDI's intergenerational dialogue. I don't have the space to put it in. CHS is a collective healing circles in global community. So we host these events. We don't host it. It's local community at invitation of UNESCO will host these workshops. And then through these workshops, and the young people rise. I will look at why young people are important. Rise and develop the futures forming and the change makers program. And this will allow UNESCO to draw evidence-based policy recommendations to the member states, and together we build a architecture of collective healing. Now, why we need to focus on global youth? Youth are today, they are more than half of the global population. In some parts of Africa, is the youth constitutes 70% of its population. So therefore, they are not, like I said, we are to them, for them, that we work together with them. So no, youth are not passive recipients of knowledge, but they're also part of the knowledge holders, the partners for social transformation. So the indigenous people say, treasure the young, then we have to trust the elder. So therefore, the intergeneration and the dimension is really important. Intergenerational process is important. And in the elder, there is this cultural wisdom, and they hold the place-based knowledge so that they can convey this to young people. Then young people can be that kind of a driving force to co-create a better world. Now, so that's the background. And we have lots of partners in, like I said, in 4 continents. That's where we work from and we work with. And UNESCO recognized that the community knows, that all the communities know the answer and have their unique approach, place-based approach to collective healing. So UNESCO's job is actually invite the communities to come together. And the first pilot we did was last year, is intergenerational dialogue. Intergenerational dialogue, we recognize there's dehumanization happened in the past. That dehumanization has continued the legacies and also continue to have harm on us. And they have that kind of transgenerational trauma embodied by all of us. But in that trauma, in that process, we also know there is a treasure that sustained our resiliency and allows us to heal. So therefore, we need space to listen, to share, to remember, and to dialogue and inquire how we can take this forward together. So why intergenerational? And many of you, having been in this dialogue, in the Black History dialogue, would have already recognized that the fact that generational trauma is actually transmitted throughout the generations. Epigenetics recognize that trauma being transmitted, for instance, from mothers to their daughters and continuing. But trauma is transmitted through telling, but equally transcending this trauma requires the space to share the stories, to remember, but also that allow that telling and remembering be witnessed. But often the community felt, especially the elders, felt they cannot do that because there's a risk of their own being re-traumatized by their story, but also the listener, when they listen and witness, they can be re-traumatized. So therefore, that is kind of a practice of silence. But once we recognize the importance of bring history along with us, so that we're not no longer unconsciously living that history and become more aware these transgenerational process. Therefore, we must break that silence. That's why intergenerational dialogue is important. To have intergenerational dialogue, it requires courageous space, because there is no space that is safe now. But to have a safe space requires courage, requires we come together to attend that memory, for us to have an opportunity to put those memory into stories. I recognize our resiliency and allow younger generation to take those treasures forward. And you probably, someone must have mentioned this notion of Sankofa. To move forward, we have to collect the treasures from the past. And many indigenous and African communities all recognize that importance of this process. Now, we work with the different communities around Atlantic shore and develop a 7-step process. And each of the process is tailored to the locals' needs. So we first need to bring the communities of basically all communities together, because young and old and the elders, young people and elders, they are basically constitute the whole community. Once we have the participants, then we introduce participants into the space. As I said, place has to be caring, has to be courageous, and it requires an ethical commitment to caring listening, deep dialogue, and co-inquiry. And once we have people coming together, the partners will do a kind of a capacity building session, but also trust building and bonding. We often experience this: when you don't have the trust, you bring people together into the space, it cannot be safe, it cannot be caring. We have witnessed in academic settings that when you ask people to come and try to understand, for instance, the nature of spiritual harm, we have seen people, when people live step into that lived moment of trauma, in articulating that suffering, that story itself create a separation, and the trust is disintegrate in that moment. So therefore, for the community to truly embark on the intergenerational process, alongside the capacity building is a trust building, and so that we already form that kind of almost like a space of interconnectedness, so that we can go deeper. So there is one-to-one. This is an elder from Nigeria, and there's a young man listening and documenting their stories. And in that process, lots of things emerged. For instance, you can see that the age difference between these two. And when the elders talk about the way that she grew up and the kind of a challenge she encountered, the young man, 21, he said, but we are going through the similar challenges. Now, how did you overcome this? How do you transcend all those challenges? So that's when the intergenerational flow began. And after the one-to-one conversation, we bring community together, these pairs together, and they share the learning. So the focus is not dwelling on the suffering, dwelling on the pain, but acknowledging the pain, recognize the harm and the trauma, but not dwell on that, because what one focus on is on those, we call it the treasures in the community, the cultural wisdom and the communal resources that allow us to move forward. And then we bring this so previously this understanding was dormant because it's inside the elders. Now they become new knowledge, new understanding, a new narrative, new story. That's inspiring. And from here, then we bring wider communities together. So there's another level of sharing. This level of sharing is actually to bring these processes as a whole. So the historical part, the present part, as the basis for the community to co-inquire into the lived realities, but also imagine possibility to move forward, so that there will be healing, there will be community transformation, there will be well-being of all. So that's the program, and it was very powerful, partly because each community came up with very special gifts or very special ideas of resiliency, and it's very life-affirming, affirms all of our dignity. So transcend our communities from being the victim of the structural violence and structural injustice, to feel that we are all human beings, we are all souls. At that level, at spiritual level, we are truly equal. And it's within that spiritual kind of a beingness we then have our own diversity, our own difference, and that's where we could share these beautiful and human resources, and to allow us to have the hope through healing. We can hope for co-flourishing with others, and that's why we always mention this Maya Angelou's quote that history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage. And here is care, but also our own dignity never need to be lived again. And so just to put this, to summarize, so in the last year or so, we've been through a very intense global process. Now we're just planning to for the next step. That is to invite community partners to come forward who would like to create spaces within their community to host intergenerational process and collective healing circles. And this will allow us to actually bring the gift as almost like a way to celebrate the end of the first decade, because we are hoping that together we're going to move into the second decade of people of African descent. And then we will take this practice, UNESCO and its partners will take this practice to global spaces. So there is more people being becoming aware of this need to for collective healing. And UNESCO is in the process of creating a young change makers program so that young people can truly in the driving seat to take the community's process forward. So I will stop there and stop the sharing and open to welcome your questions and also hear your wisdom in terms of how this can be done and in your community, including in the community like UK. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sure it has provoked some question. I will reserve my question for a while, but can I just ask who would like to start the question on the presentation that's been heard? June Elizabeth, please.
Yes, thank you very much. That was well informative, and I quite understood the journey. And I just want to ask, how did you get involved with the organization? And that's number one question. Number two is more of a statement. Like Gareth and myself and Roland, we do a lot with the Windrush survivors. And 2 years ago, the Home Office had employed someone to kind of maybe get something not so broad as this. And she interviewed us singularly, in groups, and then it's supposed to develop, but then Priti Patel allowed it. Then when Suella Braverman came, that was one of the 3 things that she cut. But this is very powerful, and I think maybe should arrange for you to give a presentation to the Home Office. I think that they would learn, and also the people who are suffering could do with something like this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, June Elizabeth. And you are my elder, and most of you are my elder. People always look at me with suspicion. Why you? You don't even belong to here. Where you come from? Why are you involved in this? And as I said, in 1997, I was just a young person. I was at university, and Sussex. And this Garen Hermes Foundation is global think tank. It's based in Brighton, and I found out what they're doing. So I asked them, can I be an intern? So I was interning for a while, and they were working with communities such as Rwanda, and then later on Syria. And you know, many communities have intercommunal conflict. None of this is actually a problem between people. It's all connected to historical injustice, and that legacy continued, and is continued legacy of injustice that prompt people's moral indignation, and that becomes driving force for violence. And often what tend to happen is, in peace building work, they address the symptoms but never go into the root. And really we need to, and the healing allow us to, first of all, to tend to the root. So when I was in Lebanon, when I was in Syria, that was my first project, and I was a researcher. My entire life is just research. I'm a witness. I'm observer. I'm a runner for the band who was doing whatever that. They are the key people, and by being a support, I'm also learning from lots of different communities. So that's how I got involved. And then I worked another place, and a lot of these intergenerational process is my learning from these communities, especially in Rwanda. Rwanda, when I step into Rwanda just after the 15th anniversary of the end of the genocide of Tutsis. The wall of silence couldn't be more visible. It's deafening. The silence is deafening. Young people come, the younger generation, they ask, where were you during genocide? Asking their parents. Why is so many people in our family killed? How are they killed? What did you do during the genocide? You know, those questions are really difficult for the elders. You know, there was survival guilt, and there was kind of perpetrators guilt, and there's a younger generation, they live the trauma from the previous generation, but they don't know why, and so on and so forth. So that's how I got involved. I'm not the right person, but I know this is the right thing to do. Because lots of communities said, why you're here, you don't know what we're going through. Nobody knows what you're going through. I wouldn't know during Elizabeth how the Windrush generation had went through. We have families. I have family coming from African descent. We can't understand each other's pain, but we can be here to hold a space. And I show up, and I show up again. I show up. I know I'm not the right person, not the right skin, but I know showing up is the right thing to do. So that's how I'm involved, and I'm still here to do the legwork, to be a service to the community who needs this service from UNESCO, from the academic, from university, from global communities. Now, in terms of your statement, that's such a strong statement and is spot on, because for the last year, we had elders from all the elders part. You've seen them. You can recognize their faces. Some from Jamaica, some others from St. Vincent. And these elders, they are the Windrush generation. They are here to share their experience, their grandparents or grandparents' experience with our young people. But in the meantime, allow young people to learn from them. And you know, if anything, our admiration is to the elders, that you were here. You continue to be here, continue to offer your wisdom to us. And the Church of England has a commission. The Church of England has been commissioned to address the history of the legacies, because as you know, I don't need to mention that story, but the church commissioners put together 100 million, and lots of Windrush generations were part of the consultation. they came to us and say the Windrush generation came up with 41 recommendations, and UNESCO offering what we've learned from the community to them. So at some point, process cannot stop, because once we know that we need to work for our future generation, like that elder said, once the young people are awoken, although school's curriculum doesn't teach this history, although the school and higher education does not touch upon it, but once our younger generation had been touched by it, they don't stop. So the young people we touched, they continue, each of them, on a project, and UNESCO want to nurture them. So thank you very much. Dr. Crawford.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Gill. Thank you very much. And please don't think I am facetious in saying that you did not choose. You were chosen for this vocation. There are alternatives in your life you could have undertaken, and you have undertaken this journey. And you remind me so much of Albert Schweitzer in the Belgian Congo. You remind me so much of the Moravians who came to Jamaica in 1753 to teach our ancestors literacy. I want to thank you. And long before you or your parents were born, I had access to the book by James Baldwin, and mine was Nobody Knows My Name. Perhaps even today, our names are not known. And then when you spoke about Maya Angelou, because I actually met her here in Jamaica, and she autographed one of her books for me, This Wrenching Pain. So I really, really want to thank you and to ask that in your community transformation about global youth concentration, that some provision be made through some funding, some fundraising activity, that there is need for, especially in my own country, spaces like town halls where young people can meet. Here in Jamaica, we have to encroach on the church halls, which might be in use, the school spaces, which are in use. When I went to England first time, I saw these town halls where people could meet, they could interact, they could discuss, and so on. But here in my own country, we do not have that. In fact, in many Caribbean countries, that does not exist. And for that empowerment, we need it. I thank you most sincerely and pray with you for continuity of purpose in such a noble endeavor. I could imagine Professor Gill at this time on the beach, and she has chosen for this vocation. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And your generosity is more than appreciated. I come across this all the time, that there's no trust, you see, unless we have coming from the same background. It's that pain that draw us together. And I'm always apologetic. I always apologetic for not doing enough. And and Dr. Crawford, if I may say so, I'm not the hero that you mentioned. On the contrary, I think UNESCO and the university take the view that where community holds the answer. Each community holds the answer. We're not there to offer anything, but instead, if we say to the community, you know the answer, and we're here to listen, because if UNESCO learn how the community can regenerate, can transform, then they bring the wisdom and ideas to their national government. You see, all the countries participating in the project, their government, the national government, they receive a note to say, do you know that your country, in this community, they're participating in UNESCO project, will learn so much. Then we can take the wisdom transform a global governance, transform that the culture of institution. How can we make it more caring, loving, and how can we step away from that structural dehumanization? And do we know how to repair the house in the Isabel Wilkinson's metaphor? You know, we are basically globally the systems is a house. We heard previously in this space, you have someone talk about Sarah James' book on the Black Jacobins and your own, you know, Caribbean heroes, but also Eric Williams, capitalism and slavery. In fact, that very system continue to really, we are living in that system. That's why whatever we do, we only just perpetuate that system. There's so much I can say. I mean, this conversation is too so much you want to say, and I'm sorry that Garrick, I'm taking so much time just to say this, but how do we actually, when we come to the communities, the community began to say, well, there's a bigger system, and the system is pushing us away from what gives us our sense of belonging, who we are, that is our own community. But in lots of communities, whether it's in Nigeria or Richmond, Virginia, or in the Caribbean, the only way we can be successful in the modern term of success, economically successful, is actually leave to leave the very nurturance of our soul. And then when we leave our community, leave our elders, leave our own ancestors' resources behind, we become an active participant in that very system that deprived us of our soul. So, yeah, sorry.
Thank you. No, don't be sorry. You know, the expression that you're bringing to us are deep expression coming from down there, and you know, this subject matter is not a easy subject matter to talk about, and you know, you actually presented to us, and these are some of my points. I'm going to come back to your presentation. So you presented to us this collective healing, and just on that point alone, so there is individual healing, and then there's a collective healing, and there's also the intergenerational healing. And just on those points, June Elizabeth already mentioned Windrush, and it's a continuation of trauma from generation to generation. That is so. It's also a continuation from transatlantic slavery to modern time. So it's almost, it hasn't stopped. You know, that is clear. However, one of the things that you mentioned is about Sankova, the bird, looking back. Now, looking back to move forward, because that's exactly what it's about. We have to understand the past, the history, in order to move forward. And it is painful to look into that history. And you gave the example of the grandchild, you know, young child at 7, you know, speaking to grandma, you know, and I always have the same thought. I don't know if I could live back then in that situation. I always think that, how would I live in that situation and deal with those things? we can never imagine. We read about these things, but we cannot, understand what that is from day to day. And it's painful even to try to go deep into that. And we have to stop ourselves at some point. Don't go any further. It's too deep to go any further. But what you said strike a chord to me, and this is the point I want to sort of raise. It's a bigger conversation, because for the individual to be healed and for the collective to be healed, the collective have to engage in that process to be healed. And what I find difficult to comprehend is this: the people who have done all of this, there is no sign of them accepting this process of healing. And I think some work needs to be done on that point, because I'm a member of Hope University in Liverpool. We have the Bishop Tutu the Memorial Lecture Theatre, because he came there and he gave several lectures about apartheid, what was happening in apartheid during prior to Mandela being released and so forth. And I listened to 2 or 3 of his lectures, and it was all about trying to reach a position of resolving not to hate, not to go down that road that those people had done to you. So for me, in this conversation in Black history, we try to address, and we always make the point that these conversation is not restricted in one place, in one arena. These conversations need to be taken out into a much bigger arena. And you mentioned the church, dealing with reparation, etc. But also, money is not the answer to that issue. But what we're trying to do is to genuinely, engage with people. And when I say people, I'm talking about, the system, the people who control the system. And those conversations need to go into those spaces. And June Elizabeth mentioned one space that we've been trying to go into, and we have got dialogue with the Home Office, but the Home Office is only one part of the bigger government system. And it's how we get these conversations into those places, and for them to, how will they deal with the information that they're receiving? We don't know what responses they will get, but they need to be given the opportunity to receive the information. What they do with it could be another matter.
Thank you. Should we also hear what I would also hear what Rose
Yes, please.
and then we can fold this conversation together. I have so much to share with you, Garrick.
Do I have to come back for part 2 later on?
Absolutely,
Yeah?
Absolutely, next week. Yeah.
I was sat here quietly listening, but intently actually, and the resonance is actually quite painful. And I was thinking about the words you used earlier about yourself, Professor, about not being important in this, not the hero, not you know, and actually, you know, I feel a sense of not the loss. I feel a sense of loss, if you like, around us, around who we are, about how we recognize and celebrate, acknowledge our contributions, not just to conversations, but to evolving change, actually capturing those lived experiences of our elders, and we're elders to you, but there are elders beyond us as well. And whilst we are trying to understand and heal, and I actually so get that, because I believe I've used the word PTSD in my own writing, but I think there's something more than that. It's deeper. It's long-lived. It's almost like a rigidity surrounding individuals. You have to break away, break out of it, both individually, singly, and collectively. So listening to Garrick and hearing June Elizabeth, and the two of them having those conversations with the Home Office, and there's also the sort of question around our healing, but other people's acknowledgement of our pain, if you like, or our experiences, and how frustrating it is that maybe they're not actually seeing it. They're not willing to engage with in the conversation about it, in order that we can all move really forward and develop even further together. I'm not sure that they particularly want to, actually. I'm not sure that people necessarily want to recognize or even engage with some of these things around what's happened and the longevity of that effect on the people. And I was thinking about my own situation and thinking, well, I was feeling a little bit recently like what my writing about people's experiences in the Caribbean community, it doesn't, you know, maybe it's not enough, and I'm not the right person to continue to collect those stories of those lived experiences. And you really, when you were talking about yourself and your difference as is perceived, or you hear it from people about why you're doing what you're doing, and actually the thing that you said was, I may not be the right person, but I'm trying to do the right thing, really resonated with me. And I almost feel, I don't know you, and I almost feel inspired by, I do feel inspired by that, actually. I do. I want you to know that actually has meaning for me, because it is trying to do the right thing that's important in all of this. And so any little thing that I do, I hope will help with the conversations, will help to acknowledge, to recognize, to celebrate, but not in and of itself, but as part of something bigger. Because I feel that we are losing those wonderful things about ourselves in this sort of march forward sometimes. And I want us, you know, so for my little bit is to try and quickly grab hold of that bit of knowledge, the nuggets, and just sort of try and open those voices a little bit, so we can say we are more than, and therefore we can continue to build our strengths in order to march in a very positive and collective sort of way amongst everybody, not just my little Caribbean bit, because that's not small to me, but something much, much bigger and more accepting of others as well, who are trying to do the right thing. So I just, you know, may not make sense what I'm trying to say there.
It makes total sense. In Garrick and Rose, you two, yeah, you are my elder, and I think what you didn't say, but I think lots of the African and the indigenous communities understand this. That is, when you're perpetuating something so brutal, if you are the perpetuator, if you are the perpetrator of a brutality such as the killing, you know, PTSD happens to all the war soldiers. They came back, they live that PTSD. And for people who live in that system, continues to perpetrate violence, what kind of harm is it living in? We just don't see it, because sometimes it's not the right place to talk about that. And when we did the symposium, UNESCO symposium on healing the relational and spiritual harm, the Africans always said, well, the harm is not done to that spiritual level, that harm is not done to us. Because think about the whole, people are robbed from their land, from their homes, and took on the ship. And at Middle Passage, many of them perished. They physically perished, and they land in a new continent. What happened to them? At a spiritual level, physical level, they are tethered, they're chained, but the spiritual level, they are connected more solidly, strongly. They basically, they bond with God, they bond with the spirit, they bond with whatever that gave rise to the sacredness of being human, being a person. So for them, for maybe for all our ancestors coming from the continent, they leave that beautiful legacy, that is that deeper connection to our humanness. Without that connection of our humanness, we wouldn't have survived. Without that elder connected to her humanness and her anticipating the younger generation to arrive and hold that dignity inside her, we wouldn't be here today. So therefore, when we offer that question, what is the nature of spiritual harm? Is the harm that done to those perpetrators, because they are cut off. There is a severance. There is a severing. It literally, really, whenever we hurt someone, as that act being acted upon and others, we lost connection with what made us human. Because that moment, Gandhi said, if we do that, we retaliated, respond violence with violence, at that moment, we lost that connection. So think about the authors, like Aimé Césaire, think about Fanon, and think about the Du Bois, W.B. Du Bois. They really see what it means to the colonizers, what the colonizers experiencing, the kind of when you cut off with the source of love. You cannot love yourself. We cannot love ourselves. We cannot love each other. We cannot love what make life vivid and enriching. So in that sense, the system, if the system is perpetuated by the kind of mentality, by that indifference, by that ignorance, by that kind of separation, then the system cannot be caring. And so Paulo Freire, and the Brazilian philosopher, he says that it's actually, although we seem to be the oppressed, but by being oppressed, when we connect it to the pathways, the journey to become more fully human, because the more the pressure, the more we focus on becoming more fully human, because everything else, and the Garrick said, it's not about money. It's not the material. It's not about. It's about what make us we, and so how do we actually allow that consciousness of this kind of the systems, the dehumanizing nature of the system, to penetrate in our collective consciousness? Then healing has to be. We said collective healing is not just individual. The Windrush generations, or people in the continent, or the other ones in the entire Americas being colonized. It's not just these people's healing. is also the healing. We have to recognize the other people that we talk about, who are not in the room. We have to be there. Like myself, I had to be here. We have to be part of that an endeavor. And so lots of community. There is a global movement, trust building. There's a global movement of a collective healing. And like you said, Rose, that's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. But how many people can join the right thing, to take part in the right thing? And that we need to extend that invitation, because Desmond Tutu was said that it's really high demand to ask the community to say, you must forgive otherwise, and that doesn't work. But we, at the same time, how do we give? Because I did a research looking at the global community's practice of human and rehumanization. How do you actually rehumanize those who actually who dehumanized us and continue to dehumanize? And one practice is actually really interesting, that you actually don't, if someone, for instance, they killed someone else, you actually literally put that person in the water, and as if, and then, but the community has every hand around, lift him out, or her and someone out of the water, so that you have a moment of reborn. You reborn back, because an act of violence separates us from the community, from us. And so that moment of rebirth is actually birth back into the human embrace. In that rebirth, and a lot of communities see those people who are being reborn into this embrace, they are the most active advocate for the oppressed. Well, I don't know whether this is the right conversation at the moment, but I get really excited because I carry with me, live with those stories that different communities offer. And each community has their own way of working it through. The only thing that we cannot work through is this house we live in, because when we live in this house, we can't really tear it open. But something that is young people brought to our consciousness, that is, if we don't have collective healing, we wouldn't have a house to live in anymore, because it's the same mentality, thieving, extracting, and enslaving that we did to human beings, to the indigenous people of African descent, and before then the Irish, before then the Jewish, before then the system allow us to actually to extract to such extent. There isn't anything that to extract from humans. Now they extract everything from nature. Nature, our sisters and brothers, all the beings in nature is also part of the greater fertility. And if we take everything out of nature, the same kind of extraction and enslaving, there isn't anything left. There isn't everything left.
The point that Rose made about, I mean, the space that you've gone into, that is a challenging space, clearly. And sometimes it may be to your advantage to go into that space rather than somebody from the what's the word I would use? Somebody from that community. It might be difficult for that person to go into that space, whereas you can go into that space much easier, and probably can open conversation that would not easily be open if it was from another person. Are you following me? You see, and you know, it's a similar thing to when a person seeks some help whether that would be mental health or they're rather, you know, somebody they don't know. You're not related. It's an impartial person that they have no connection with, so they can open and start a conversation. But if there was a connection there, something comes before the conversation, you're not able to get into that conversation. Okay? So in some way, you know, that is to your advantage, I think, to allow you to do that. What would be interesting, as June Elizabeth says, is coming back at a later time, maybe in a month or so time, for a second part 2 conversation. And because you mentioned the young people, and we say the same thing, they are the generation of tomorrow, the young people. And what we impart to the young people when we go back to where we came from, back to the dust of the spirit world, it is the next generation that is going to continue. Now, we saw something remarkable when George Floyd murder and the world came together. I've been in this space for about 52 years in social science and community and activism, etc. But when George Floyd murder took place, the whole world came together. And you saw the young people who stood up and for the first time wanted to now challenge the system. What has happened? We've never seen that before. And, you know, for me, that is giving us a glimpse into the future. Because, you know, we keep saying the older ones are tired now. We've done enough, you know, and we cannot continue at the same pace, but somebody have got to take the mantle and carry on. And that is our young people. That is the 70% of the African people at the age of under 30, etc. They are the people that's going to move forward. And so for us, whatever we can do to assist them and to support them, then for me, we're following the direction of our ancestors, because to me that is the future.
Our experience is once young people are awoken, for instance, when we're in Richmond, Virginia is very significant because they call itself 1619 place. It's the first ship of enslaved people enter in the North American shore. That's the port. It was so powerful. So people had gone through the voyage, arrived in Richmond. They had to walk in a line in chains and to the market to be sold. And so our young people, local young people, they know this history. But when we created, when we say, although it says I'm from the outside, so June Elizabeth, my ancestors are from the steppe. So we're Manchus, so we come from with the nomads in the Asian steppe. And that's where my ancestors' bones lay. I never really invite people to come to the conversation. It's always local organizations, elders, and invite people to come to the conversation. So we had a dialogue group, a collective healing circle. One of the young people in the circle, he's 33 actually. He said, I live in Richmond for 33 years, and I lived in Richmond for 365 days every year. And this is the first time I'm sitting in a circle with our elders and listening to stories in this way, and they're listening to me, often sharing. And then he turned around and said, what took you so long? What took you so long? So, I mean, all of you are the elders. Let's not take that long. And again, And I'm going to just end this conversation today here. And
I think that's a good point to finish on. Yes.
And please, if you need me, and also we have lots of communities. We can bring someone from Richmond to talk to you. We can have some from Nigeria to talk to you, and also we have the UK a group. So anytime, and basically we've learned we need to listen to each other.
Yeah.
So I'm here.
You've just offered something to us, and I think we should accept the offer. I would like to see the contribution of our young people on this platform, from Richmond, from Nigeria, 4 or 5. I would like to, so that we can start to have that conversation, that intergenerational conversation, and sharing that. I think that's something that we need to organize.
Yes. So in order to not wait for another 33 years, Richmond has a historically black university, and I will tell you the story next time, but it's called Virginia Union University. We're trying to connect the students with the elders in the continent. The missing, apart from the missing our ancestors, it is also missing of the soil where our ancestor came from, but also our ancestors' bones lay. So we have an intergenerational dialogue, and young people from Nigeria are going to talk to elders in Richmond, maybe talk to you, and that'd be really nice. And then and the elders from the continent will talk to the young people in the diasporas, basically.
Yes.
There is a kind of a dynamic and the curiosity between diasporas and the people from the continent. So I'm very good at showing up. And
thank you very much.
I will show up
for showing up this afternoon.
Thank you.
And yes, you certainly have given us food for thought, and these conversations, I think, are necessary, and we look forward for you returning with the younger people who will be able to at least have a different conversation.
I'll reach out to 2 young people. One is called Casey. She was at UNESCO webinar. Spirited young woman, and Shay from Nigeria. And we'll negotiate this in terms of time with Liz or yourselves.
Sure,
and thank
sure.
you so much for
Sure.
Dr. Crawford is trying to say something.
Vivian, undo your mic. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I said I'm here as one of the young persons.
Yes. So this is our youngest member of the team.
I attended the Dr. Crawford's presentation, and I listened to that. It was beautiful in terms of the church.
Yes.
So, yes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to finish now, and I'm sure Liz will be excited to actually listen back of the conversation. And next week, Liz should be back on the platform. So yeah, we send her love to Liz, and thank you all for attending this afternoon. And I know Vivian now finishes breakfast. Is now
no, but we want to say thank you to Garrick for coordinating this presentation.
Pleasure.
Fantastic. Yeah. There is a calypso which says, Garrick, a deputy is essential.
All right. Okay, Rose, and nice to see you again. So thank you for coming along, and we look forward to our next presentation next week. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now because Simon is gone. Let me just quickly see where that is. Oh yes, stop video. Okay.
Please forgive me, and I need to leave before the elders. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. No,
again, very
not
soon.
a problem. Not a problem.
Thank you.
You go off.
One love.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So Simon has gone, hasn't he?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I'm just looking, recording on in the cloud. So I need to just save it to the cloud. Why? Is it already been saved to the cloud?
I'm not sure.
I can see record on this on the, it got to be on the cloud, because otherwise it will be on your computer. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're off recording now, so that's it. That was quite a powerful session, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we need to just relax now and just clear our brain for a bit.
Do we know what's on next week at all?
I haven't seen the speaker list, but there is something arranged.
Okay.
Have a look at the Black History Conversation website. You will
Okay.
see upcoming speakers.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all listed there. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's the same login each time, recurring, so it
Okay.
doesn't change.
Right. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much. Take
Take care. Have a good afternoon. Bye bye
Have
now.
a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much,
Bye.
everyone. See you next
Take
week.
care.
Yeah, cheers.